Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here to do my November wrap up. So I had a really great and enjoyable reading month in November. I had a mix of different things in November. I decided that I wanted to reread a few of my favourite books and restart some of my favourite series, and I did that for a few series in November and I had a lot of fun doing that. And then I also hosted my Barkalong Readathon in November as well, and I do have a whole weekly vlog up where I talk about the books that I was reading and just the things I was doing during that week. So I will leave that linked up above, and I talk a lot about the books that I was reading and what I thought about them during that vlog, so I won't talk about those books too much in this. So the first book I want to talk about is an audiobook that I was reading at the start of November, and this kind of suited that I finished it in November because it was non-fiction. So it kind of while I wasn't really participating in non-fiction November, I still was able to read a couple of non-fiction books in November. This book that I was reading was Cultism by Montell. This is a really interesting book and it's kind of a hyped book on BookTube at the moment, so I'm sure you've probably already heard about it. But this is basically a book that looks at cults, and specifically when we're looking at cults and how cults have happened in the world and how they've emerged and how people have got sucked into them and the tragedies that are connected to cults, such as the Jonestown and Heaven's Gate and things like that, and you know, the Manson murders and all those different things that are connected to cults. Montell is specifically looking at the language around cults and how this can also be looked at like different things within our ordinary life, such as different fitness like fads, things like Soul Cycle and like Peloton and things like that. And it was really interesting reading this, and I think it was just really well written. It was really easy to read and it was really easy to listen to for a non-fiction book as well, as I normally prefer my non-fictions. I normally prefer to physically read non-fictions and then to just read fiction books on audiobook. But I got on really well with this one on audiobook, and I just thought, as I said, it was really nicely written. I think it was, you know, Montell, she treated every reader the same. Like, you didn't have to have like a big massive base knowledge on cults. She really like gave the information in a really accessible way. And overall I really enjoyed this one, so I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I definitely think that if you're at all interested in this, to give it a go. The next two books I read were the first and second book of one of my favourite series that I've decided to reread, and that is Leviathan Wakes and Caliban's War, and both of these are by James S.A. Corey, and they are the first and second book in the Expanse series, which I've talked a good bit about on this channel, especially as the last and final book. Well, the last and final book, so the same thing. The last book in the series did come out the end of November, so yeah, I'm kind of working my way up to rereading the series to eventually read that book. Now, I don't think I'll be getting to that book in 2021 at all, and it will probably be like the first quarter of 2022, if even, by the time I finish the first 8 books in the series until I get to the 9th one. But I'm really glad that I've decided to reread this series, because I just wanted to go into the last book feeling really fresh with the characters, really fresh with the story, and really able to kind of be really ready for the last book, I guess. This is just a fantastic sci-fi series. This book series, we are following a crew of people who end up on a mission, just a normal kind of space mission. They end up discovering this they end up stumbling upon this secret that is really dangerous, and it turns out that there's a lot of people that will kill them for this secret, and so this secret remains completely hidden and that no one else will know about it. And through their ways of escaping these death threats that they're getting, they end up accidentally kind of starting a war between Earth and Mars. But in the background of this type of war, like this brewing war and the political things that are going on, there is also something called an alien proto-molecule that is threatening the lives of every single human being within the solar system, and that could like completely change who they are, could completely change what being human means in like the worst ways possible. And it might be up to the crew of the Rocinante, who we followed, who are captained by James Holden. It might be up to them to end up saving everyone from this. Both the threat of this alien proto-molecule and then the political like activities throughout this series, like it continues with each book, and things get bigger and more complicated, and the crew of the Rocinante have their own kind of adventures with each book. They end up in like different life-threatening situations with each book. And in Caliban's War, it kind of follows on, but we also were introduced to some other characters as well. One called Avasarala, who kind of becomes a little bit more of a main figure and like kind of an important figure throughout the rest of the series, and she is just so cool. She's one of my favorite characters in the whole series. Loved meeting her again for the first time, and She's just so badass. She's like an older Indian lady. She's a grandmother who like swears like a pirate. Really, really tough, but at the same time she's just like a lovely grandmother to her family and like mother and wife, and loves her husband to bits, but it's a very cool character and I really like her. So yeah, the first are both like between 4 and 5 stars for me. I really, really enjoyed them and I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the series. Favourite series that I started on again is Malice by Gwynne. This is the first book in the Faithful and the Fallen series, which is one of my favourite fantasy series, and I'm again really, really glad I was able to reread this. This is my first time rereading the series and I'm just so hyped for the rest of the books because I really, really love this series. In this one we are following a kind of a group of characters, but one of the main characters we are following is a young boy called Corbin. We first meet him when he's only about 12 or 13 years old, and throughout this series we follow him up until he's like in his 20s. We follow him for like quite a long time. This book spans about I think a year to 2 years in time, and we're following Corbin as he just comes of age. He's learning how to fight and be a man. This is something he's really naturally good at, but then it also appears that there is some kind of prophecy. There is magic in this world. There is fighting between different kings. There is treachery. There are giants in this world that are like, mostly they tend to be bad and, you know, kill human beings. There's this prophecy that people are starting to hear about, a fear of this world called the Bright Star, but there's also going to be this villain called the Black Sun. And we know in this book that we probably already know who the Black Sun and the Bright Star are. Corbin is connected to this, but who could he be? Could he be the Black Sun? Could he be the Bright Star? We just kind of have to read on and kind of see where it goes. This book is just, I think it does start off a little bit slower, and we do meet a lot of characters at the start of this book, and I kind of forgot how many characters we follow, and I can really see how some people would really struggle with that at the start. But I do think about halfway through this book it really falls into its own rhythm, and we start really getting to know the characters we are following, and we really start to get really invested in their story, and you just kind of want to keep reading. And while it is annoying sometimes when the character suddenly switches and you're suddenly in a whole different part of the world and you're not following the same particular storyline, or you're not in that particular scene anymore, it just makes you all the eager to maybe go back to your favourite character or that particular scene. And you just want to keep reading and keep going through the book. In this book as well is the animal companions. Animal companions are a really like strong theme in this book, and particularly for Corbin, and I just love that, as I always do in a lot of books. And I also really appreciated this time around when I was reading this book, just Corbin's like main, like he's a lot of like a really good friendship group, and then he's also really, really close to his family, his mum and his dad, and then his sister, and I just really, really loved that. And I just really loved seeing that on a page, like a young boy, a teenage boy who really loves his mum, who really loves his dad, and then also really loves his sister. And it was just really lovely seeing that lovely family group and seeing how they all love each other and care for each other and protect each other. And yeah, I just really appreciated seeing that too. So this is always going to be a 5 stars for me. I just absolutely love it, and I'm just really looking forward to going on and reading the next book. After that, I decided to reread one of my favourite audiobooks, and this is Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wein. Now this one is, I've never read this in physical format. I've read this twice now, and both times I have read it on audiobook, and I just think it just is such a good audiobook. So in this book we are following a woman in 1943, and she is British, and she's been arrested as a British spy in France by the Nazis, and she's been held by the Nazis. She is being tortured by them, she's imprisoned, and she is now writing her story for her captors, and we're learning about who she is, where she comes from, and we're getting this story through this story of a friendship she has, and this about her meeting her best friend, and how her best friend is a pilot, and her story within World War II, and how her story connects to this girl that we're following who is a captive of the Nazis. And this book is it's such an incredible story of survival, of bravery, of friendship, female friendship in particular, and just like the war effort, and how so many people did so many amazing things during the war, and like the people who lost their lives and how tragically they lost their lives as well. This book is kind of one of those ones that has you on like an emotional roller coaster throughout the whole thing, but I just absolutely love it. It's an absolutely brilliant book, and yeah, I'd recommend people read it like anyway, but I would 100% really recommend people pick this up on audiobook, because I think it is just such a good audiobook, because it is written all in a diary format or a letter format. It just lends itself really, really well to audiobook. It just made me want to go on and reread the other books that I've read by Elizabeth Wein, that are all kind of connected in with this codename Verity story, where the characters are all existing in the same world and they kind of know each other. So yeah, I might go on and end up reading Rose Under Fire, because I really want to reread that now, even though I only read that last year, I think. I was onto my dog books during the Barkalong Readathon, so I won't go into too much detail about these books. I will just say what they were and what I rated them. So the first book I read was Lily and the Octopus by Stephen Rowling. This was on my 5-star predictions for this year. Though it didn't end up being a 5-star book, but I did give it a really strong 4 stars. And this is just a really sweet story about a man and his dog who ends up becoming terminally ill. And it's kind of about how this man comes to terms with, you know, the like eventual like death of his dog, and how he is going to have to say goodbye to her. And there's a lot of emotional bits in this, but there's also loads of sweet and lovely bits. And if you're a dog owner, or if you love dogs, and particularly if you've had a dog that has been ill and you've had to say goodbye to it, or you've just had an elderly dog where you've had to, you know, also had to come to the terms and make, you know, that really, really hard decision, I think you just really appreciate a lot of things in this book. So it was very, very sweet. Then I read Bertie the Blitz Dog by Libby Parker. This is a World War II book about this dog called Bertie, who is in London during the Blitz. So you're kind of getting the story of World War II through this little dog. This again was just a really sweet book. I really enjoyed it. I really loved seeing kind of, I guess, the perspective of animals during World War II, and things I didn't really think about before, about like how people who lived particularly in London, how they kind of had to get rid of their pets, how pets were treated during World War II, and kind of the sad parts of that, and how frightening it would have been for pets as well. It was a good read for me, but I do think in terms of how long it was, the pacing of it could have been better. I definitely got a little bit bored of it by the end, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I read The Particulars of Peter by Kelly Conaboy. This is just a really funny memoir written by Kelly about her dog Peter and how much she loves him and how she's just an obsessed dog owner. I think if you are a dog owner, or if you love dogs as well, you just need to read this book. If you're an obsessed dog parent, this is the book for you, because it's just funny. It's just one of those light books you could just pick up anytime, and yeah, I just had a really, really, really good time with it. I think Kelly writes in a really kind of self-deprecating, satirical way. She's really able to make fun of herself, but at the same time make fun of everyone else, and it's not a book to be taken too seriously, but it's just a good time. It's just a good time in a book for dog lovers. So yeah, I really liked that one, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Then my audiobook during the Barkalong Readathon was Lost Dog by Kate Spicer. This was narrated by Kate Spicer herself, and this was basically just about how she was kind of on like on the cusp of this really, really bad spiral in her life, where she was, you know, she was taking drugs, she was drinking too much, she was partying too hard, and she really needed to make a change, like a beneficial change in her life, and she decides to adopt a dog, and she ends up adopting this dog called Wolfie. And she kind of just chronicles about how Wolfie came into her life, and how she instantly, you know, falls in love with this dog, and how her life just changed for the better when she got Wolfie. And she kind of just talks about the bond between her and Wolfie, and yeah, just what a lovely dog he was. And then we also, this kind of is split into 2 parts. The second part of the book is when Wolfie goes missing for over a week, and it's about Kate's journey trying to find him, and like doing everything she can, including like dog psychics and dog detectives, to try and find out where he is, to try and get him back. And this one overall was fine for me. I think Kate Spicer did a really good job in terms of narrating. I think she'd actually be good as a narrator in general for audiobooks. I just think I didn't really know that much about Kate Spicer going into this book. She's a journalist, and I just didn't really care about her life and like the bits about her life, particularly at the start of this book. I didn't really care about what this all the problems of this white privileged woman who like owns her own property in London, and, you know, goes around wearing this like vintage fur coat. Like, I'm not really sure like I cared about her. I cared about Wolfie, and then I did enjoy the parts with Wolfie, but I just didn't care about Kate Spicer herself, and which sounds a bit like cruel, but in like a nice way. I just, yeah, so I gave this like a 2.5 to a 3 stars. I don't think it was a bad book in any means. It just, yeah, it just didn't like tick all of my boxes. And then the last book I finished during the Barkalong, or I started during the Barkalong Readathon, I technically finished this in December, but I'm going to conclude this in my November wrap up, is What the Dog Knows by Kat Warren. This is a really interesting book. It's probably one of my favourite books I've read all year, and definitely probably one of my favourite non-fiction books. And this is about Kat Warren, who ends up becoming a volunteer cadaver dog handler, and she trains her dog Solo, who's a German Shepherd. She trains Solo to be a cadaver dog, which is basically a dog that is called in by the police department when they are looking for someone who they either know to be dead or suspect to be dead. So these dogs are trained in a really particular way to smell a dead body and the gases and the different chemical reactions within a body when a body dies, and we stop being who we are, and you know, just general biology takes its toll, and decomposition and stuff like that, including just even like bones that have been buried for years underground. These dogs are able to kind of either find exactly where they are, or in particular find like an area where people can search for these bodies. And it's a really you know, in-depth process. And one of the most interesting things about it is that like Kat was doing this, it kind of becomes this hobby for her. She always was into dog obedience, but then this is kind of like a next step up of dog obedience, training her dog to do this. But it's all a hobby, like she's not paid for it, she's like helping out the police department when they need her as a volunteer. And it was just really interesting learning about this, because I'd never really heard about it before, or really knew the process of it. And I just think in like terms of just nature writing in general, I think this is a really interesting book. I don't think you have to love dogs to enjoy this book. I think you might just like have an interest in biology, in nature, and how animals work and things like that, because I think it's really fascinating how dogs use their noses and how they can be trained to sniff out human bones and human decomposition in particular, and ignore maybe the other animals and other decomposing things that are like in the earth, but they can particularly point out human beings. And what is actually one of the most interesting things I found out during this book is that dogs can even like track in water, so they can be on a boat, and because of the gases in the body, if a body is underwater, the gases will rise up to the surface, and a dog might be able to like tell you exactly whereabouts to look for in a lake or in a river and things like that. And I just thought that was really interesting. Valuable dogs are to our lives, and just how amazing dogs are. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I really recommend it to people to read. So that is everything I read in November. Please let me know what you guys think. Did you guys read any dog books? What was your favourite book in November? Are you guys reading Christmas books already? And yeah, I would love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.